John Haller och Daniel Seaman diskuterar ett framtid.
At this new Abraham Shield group sort of give passing reference to a two-state solution. So let's walk through that. I mean, how do you see this unfolding, at least from where you sit? You know, what's going to happen? Two-state, this, you know.
You're using yesterday's, literally, not literally yesterday's, right, but old speak. I mentioned before, the world has changed. The Middle East has changed. Too many people are still caught up in the same resolutions and concepts of the past. This is all over. It's erased. There will never be two states. There will not be a two-state solution to this. The Palestinians have shown themselves to not being capable and having no interest of residing in an independent state. They want to annihilate Israel. And just look at all the demonstrators, those supporting them. What are they chanting? From the river to the sea. They want to destroy, eliminate Israel. So with all due respect to them, they can go screw themselves, because we're not going to roll over and die. When we said never again, this is what we meant. And it's hard for them to accept that. Now, for too many years, they had the opportunity of the two-state solution. Not only did they not follow through on it, they tried to use it to annihilate us. So that's over. Now, there are other things happening in the world. You have an administration here which realizes the American role in the world. And anybody who wants to have real peace in the world, wants to have liberal Judeo-Christian values running the world, wants the United States to govern the world. Now, you can go on in all this woke nonsense of how the United States is terrible. No country in the world is perfect. But I'd much rather have the Americans running things, as history has shown us, than any other people in the world. And this is what is, like I said before, common sense is prevailing. This administration is an administration of common sense. And common sense means you fight your enemies, you defeat them, and you stand by your allies. And this is what they're doing. And if there's change happening in the world right now, the United States understands that elements like Russia and China and the extreme Islam, by the way, which is supported today by Qatar, who are an American ally. The Americans have to address the threat and the conniving that is being done by Qatar. But that's the next stage. Right now, what is happening is this. The United States is reestablishing itself as the main leader and main power in the world. This slap in the face that the Americans received in this whole concept of, which is the future of the economy and the future, which is AI, and seeing how China was able to take itself to new levels. The Americans are addressing that right now. And this also is a benefit that Israel is enjoying, because what people didn't notice, that the other thing happening was that the United States signed very elaborate economic deals with Israel. Whereas in this whole area of AI, they will be putting money into research in Israel, and Israel will become the research and development for the Americans on this topic, because they're aware of our abilities. Just like in the battlefield, just like in the war, that anything that Israel developed here, we shared our knowledge and our experience with the United States. All these things that were done in the war in the past 15 months are being shared, and some very, very amazing things have occurred. All this knowledge that we gathered with new technologies that were applied in the battlefield, it's all being shared with the United States. So the Americans are benefiting from that. But they also understand that we have a lot to offer to the United States economic-wise. So they've signed these agreements, and this is part of what is happening in the change occurring here. The change occurring here is something that they operated and worked upon in the previous Trump administration, which were the Abrahamic Accords, trying to create this bridge from the East, India, the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, etc., to Europe, to provide them not only with oil, but also with goods, etc. And the idea was to create a port. From the beginning of this war, it was quite clear that when the war is over, Gaza will be that port of exports. The thing that changed yesterday was that now the United States is not leaving this just to randomly occur out of the goodwill of the elements here, which means Israel, Saudi Arabia, etc. The United States is taking responsibility for that. And that's what Trump meant by saying the United States will take control of Gaza. They will take control once Gaza is prepared to move to the next step, which is becoming that port of export for the Arab world, for the Middle East, to Europe. This will provide jobs. This will provide a lot for the people involved in that. It will provide jobs for the Egyptians in the Sinai, which is just close to Gaza. But once Israel eliminates the threat of Hezbollah, of Hamas, in this case of Gaza, then you can start moving to the next stage. Since Gaza is uninhabitable at the moment, that means that immense changes are going to happen there. The Gazan population will be moved to other locations. Gaza there will be an American effort to rebuild the Gaza and build that economic element within the Gaza Strip. And the presence of Americans there will promise that terrorists will no longer return. You don't need American troops. Israel will take care of the security aspect. The Americans will build that future economic base, which is Gaza. Will the Americans eventually have a military presence there? I do believe so. And that will become the biggest American military base, not against Gaza, but for American forces in the Middle East. And I think this is also an indication of them saying to Qatar that, look, you benefit from our presence. The biggest American base right now in the Middle East is in Qatar. And if the Qatarians don't change their behavior and stop funding extremist Islam and jihadist Islam, the Americans will move out of there. And there'll be sanctions against Qatar as well. But if we go back to Gaza right now, this is all part of this bigger picture occurring right now and the changes that we are to expect in the Middle East. You can forget the concepts of the past, 2 states, peace, that's not happening anymore. It's all going to be economic based, which serves the interests, first and foremost, of the United States. It positions the United States as the world leader. The war in the Ukraine did not bode well for the Russians because it exposed them to not being the superpower they wanted to present themselves as being. So I believe here Trump will put out a hand to the Russians to allow them to end this battle with some respect and to be part of this economic change occurring here in the Middle East. I believe that'll be the next step. Don't pay attention right down to the noise coming out of the Arab world. They have to say the things that they say. They have to appease their public. They're going to say what they have to say, but eventually they'll all fall in line with this because it does benefit them and it does benefit their societies. So I do believe that this whole plan, which is part of the greater changes occurring here, will eventually come down and be more successful than the nonsense we dealt with in the past 30 years of recognizing each other, sitting together, singing Kumbaya, my Lord. When you can't do that, human history has proven that's not the way things work.
So, Danny, what do Israelis want to see happen to Gaza? I mean, there's a couple million people there. Everybody is displaced. Trump was correct that the thing is just an absolute disaster area. And he's going to push. I think he's going to push Egypt and Jordan. I'm seeing reports that Egypt has put a lot of military equipment on the border because I don't think they want them either. And I know Jordan doesn't want them.
Listen, Jordan, if I may remind you, back in 1970, you had the Palestinian refugees in Jordan. In 1970, there was a coup against the king in Jordan, Black September, and Jordan kicked out the PLO. They moved to Lebanon. Within 4 years, there was a civil war in Lebanon, which was instigated by the presence of the PLO there. So the Arabs know that anytime you have the Palestinian present, their whole raison d'etre, their whole existence is not to create a Palestinian state, but to create upheaval in the Middle East. They were created by the Soviet Union with the single purpose of creating that upheaval in the Middle East against Israel and American allies. So it's, of course, it's reasonable for these countries not to have them there. If you remember, if it was Kuwait back in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, the Palestinians who were employees in Kuwait cooperated with the Iraqis against, and Kuwait expelled them afterwards. So any place they're present, they cause local upheaval. So it's quite clear that they may not want it. But as I said, the world right now is different, and there are ways of addressing these issues that could be, at least now, and let's remember, we're talking about Gaza is about the size of Manhattan and New York City and all its different boroughs. The Arab world, if you take just Egypt and Jordan themselves, but if you add Libya, Tunisia, locations in Syria, others, they're about half the size of the United States. So they have these areas and left as areas that are uninhabited that they can move them there. So there are options that are available if they're serious about this. But we always know that the Palestinian issue was always first and foremost the way that the Arabs continued their battle to undermining Israel and delegitimizing the state of Israel. They have to understand that this is no longer acceptable.
Yeah, it's so is it safe to say that the best conclusion is that this is part of Trump's way of negotiating something with regard to how the immediate term thing is going to work out with the people that are still moving back and forth through Gaza and to rebuild it? Let me ask you this: what would the feeling be of Israelis if the deal ended up being rebuild Gaza and bring all these people back? How is Israel going to react to that?
We don't have to react. I think that a lot of people are saying a lot of nonsense right now. Look, first off, of course, there's plans and then there's realities. A lot of things can change. You never know what could change. But if we say things will be, that's why you have to be a bit more, not skeptical, but when you're doing this, understanding that you don't jump at everything out. Today, the head of the opposition in Israel said that he's going to go to the United States, the same person who didn't want to meet with Trump before last time he was president because he thought he was an illegitimate candidate. He wants to come to Trump. They're not going to even accept him. He's such a fool. But he wants to show other elements and aspects of this. These people should shut up. They've caused enough damage over the years with their concepts of peace. They should let the mature grown-ups handle things the way it's supposed to be handled. So I'm being a bit facetious right now, but seriously, it's going to take a while to rebuild Gaza. By that time, those who are going, and by the way, every war in the world, you have populations who are uprooted. Every war, major war, you have that happening. People always talk about the Palestinian refugees. None of them speak about the 1 million Jewish refugees who lived for over 1,000 years in Arab countries, who were uprooted after the 48 war and had to come live in Israel. That's never mentioned. And everywhere in the world, refugees are recognized for a short period of time, never the second generation. With the Arabs, it goes, they're inherited now by the great-grandchildren of those who were refugees in 1948. So this constantly perpetuating the Arab misery, the Palestinian Arab misery, is disgusting and it's despicable. All these human rights groups who want to keep these Arabs in their misery, they never did a thing to prevent the leaders of these Palestinians, whether it's PLO or Hamas, from abusing their people, keeping them in poverty, building these military installations in their homelands, in their homes, etc. These human rights groups never did, and media, by the way, as well, never did a thing against them. And then after these people suffer the consequences of the actions of their leaders, they want to continue perpetuating their misery. For whatever reasons, there's a lot of money involved, a lot of money. USAID was one of those who was responsible for perpetuating the Palestinian misery in the Middle East. So what this administration is doing is putting an end to that farce as well. And it's about time that people treated the Arabs, if they so care about the Palestinians, treat them with the same dignity which you give, just for example, the Ukrainian refugees. Over 1 million people left the Ukraine. I think it's more than 1 million. Left the Ukraine during the war there, accepted in Europe and other locations in Israel as well. This happens in every place. When the civil war in Syria, millions of refugees were absorbed in Europe. Why aren't they accepting and why aren't they allowing the same benefits to the Arabs in Gaza and perhaps also in Judea and Samaria, as it's happening right now, because there's a terrorist element there that we're now addressing while we have this ceasefire in Gaza. we're addressing the threat that is rising in Jenin and in Tulkarem in Judea and Samaria. So what's going to happen is these people will be treated just like refugees and like displaced people in any other conflict area, will be absorbed elsewhere. And then when the time comes, when things are rebuilt, they'll be offered the opportunity of returning. I doubt that many of them will. From the Israeli perspective, we want to end the control of the Hamas there. We do not want a Palestinian Authority controlling Gaza in any situation. We want to remove the threat of Hezbollah in Lebanon. We want to remove the Iranian threat. By the way, Trump is now trying to use other means of restraining the Iranians. But if they don't see to that, if they continue, and they have patience, they can play the game. They say to themselves, all right, we'll wait 4 years now. In 4 years, Trump will be out. We're not going to wait that long. We're not going to allow them anymore to continue with the activities. And they're funding right now, they're funding and they're sending money into Syria and into Lebanon to recreate the Hezbollah, and also into Judea and Samaria. So all these things are happening. It's not that the war is over, you have total victory, not only us, for the West, and now we can move into the new world. No, this is, I would say that what was yesterday was more like the Potsdam conference back in World War II, where they're planning what the world is going to look like after the war is over.
Okay. Danny, I know I promised to